swell is what I'm shooting for, right? Oh, man. Oh, I took some notes. I wrote notes on the way here. I wrote notes on stage. And I can't see the notes because of the lighting. I should have thought about that. Maybe I'll try holding up these pieces of paper in my hand. Like that? Oh, that works. maybe like this. Or what if I use a flashlight? I'm going to figure out a way to make this work.
We got
something. These are great.
Hang on, Lonny, we got you.
You have a flashlight? I think I have that. I don't need the notes. I just kind of want the notes.
Just a second.
Am I still waiting? So, I did present before. Ooh. Oh, wow. That's exciting. This is like, you should have told me and I could have used black light, like markers. I think I'm going to make this work. Thank you. My name is Lonny Grafman. Thank you. I meant that to have more of a 12-step vibe, but, like, my name is Lonny Grafman. Thank you. Hi, thank you. And punk rock saved my life. Yeah. Maybe it saved some of your lives, too. I left home in my early teens, and I spent a lot of my first time hiding from the night. Eventually, I found punk rock, or punk rock found me. I moved into an underground nightclub called the Myrtle Turtle and kind of started my new life. At that time, I wanted to destroy everything, and I tried. I wanted to destroy a world that left some people to die while other people had more resources than they could ever use in their lifetime. War, rape, and inequity abounded, and I wanted to burn it all to the ground and start over. And punk rock understood that, right? Punk rock supported me. It provided just the right mix of anger to keep in the fight and irreverence to kind of enjoy the ride. And this movie tries to capture that. Right? It tries to capture that combination of anger and complete ludicrousy in light of it all. Tank Girl's only the second movie ever made from a U.S. female comic hero. Isn't that crazy? But this time she was a badass anti-hero, right? The first one was Supergirl in the 80s. I love this movie for what it attempted, but I also love this movie for its soundtrack, right? Like, Ice-T, Bjork, Hole, Bush, Devo, I mean, these bands kept me alive. Courtney Love wanted to be Subgirl, but Kurt Cobain, her lover, took his life around the same time, and she took a step back from being Subgirl and instead became the soundtrack maker of this movie, and thank goodness. I mean, to have L7 in a movie was just phenomenal to me. And I love this movie because of its irreverence, and especially because it doesn't have to explain shit to anyone. And I just like that, right? Like there's scenes in this movie you're like, but wait, are they gonna tell us how that could possibly happen? And no, they are not. And they don't gotta. This movie was a fight to make. The studio fought them the whole time. They tried taking out all the stuff they didn't understand, which of course was like everything. And a lot of people think that made the movie worse, right? But I kind of think it made the movie just more punk, right? Misunderstood, sold out, beaten down, but somehow still making it. And I like that aspect. These parts of the movie that were cut by the studio and then put back in by the director, and then you end up with just like a half scene, that's pretty awesome. I also love and hate post-apocalyptic movies because sometimes they're too close to home, and other times they literally are home. It took me a few years to realize that destruction and the path I was on wasn't working. In part, there was just too many innocent bystanders. So I set out on a path of radical change through building shit up instead of tearing shit down. And I got my start building resilient community technologies in squats. But now I get to work with inspired community members all around the world to build stuff better. And like Tank Girls, a lot of these communities are fighting for their own water and their own power. You want to hear about some of the stories? All right, good. New York, 2009. Global climate change, pollution, rising sea levels make a band of 5 artists try to live on a barge, getting all of their food, energy, and water from that barge. This was the barge. The idea was to float around New York City teaching about global climate change, teaching about alternatives, and inspiring people to make change now. Also, the rent prices in New York were getting pretty extreme, so it was kind of a way for 5 artists to actually live in New York at the end of 2008. This is what we built. It had solar panels, rainwater catchment, hydroponics, aeroponics, bicycle-powered laptops, soil gardens, chickens. I'll show you photos of those that trip people out. All these materials were reused. They were off of sets and water towers that had been torn down, and the materials were billboards. And especially because we're talking about Tank Girl, I think I should just point out in all of these projects that I don't think any of these projects didn't have a badass female lead. And this one was Mary Mattingly. She's the visionary behind this project. These are some of there's the wooden, old, deconstructed, 100-year-old water towers that we turned into our kitchen and composting toilets. There's the inside of the barges. We built the Arcata Marsh on top of a barge. Right? We did it in IBC totes, those 1 meter cube by 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter cubes. The badass female lead on that was Tressie Ward, a local water engineer. This is what it looked like during the day. That's what it looked like at night. Bicycle-powered laptops. We also had a rocket stove, right? Because we had to have all the fuel we were going to use had to be on that barge itself. And so we did all of our cooking on that. We had cooking shows come on and be inspired by it. The Discovery News said, if rising ocean levels force us to figure out how to float, it might not be an entirely bad thing, especially if the food tastes like this. But they are wrong. It would be an entirely bad thing if ocean levels rise and we have to float. That's bad. That's not good. It supported 5 artists. That would be hard for, a world population. It was funny being in New York. Here we are in Humboldt County, and all of these things are things we see all the time. Rainwater catchment, sure, we got that. Solar panel, yeah, we've seen that. Chickens, yeah, all the time. But in New York, people are like, whoa, chickens. They were amazed by it. And the chickens were like, whoa, a barge. But we all figured it out together. We had parties, we had workshops, we had hundreds of thousands of visitors. Nature magazine said the Waterpod seems more like a floating paradise than a post-apocalyptic ark. There's 2 things. One, I had never heard post-apocalyptic ark before, and I really liked that. I was like, oh, reporters, nice, I like that. The other thing is that it seemed like a floating paradise because we only had to serve 5 people, right? And then all the people coming on board. And also, I should point out, we were trying to get all our food, energy, and water from the barge itself, and we did a pretty good job, but we definitely didn't make all the chocolate and wine that were on board all the time. Those just appeared from people coming on board from the outside. 8 years later, back in New York, we learned a lot from that first barge project. That first project was only meant to last 5 months, just be an inspiration. But, of course, it wasn't enough. New York continued to have problems. Water, energy, climate change, and even food. New York has incredible food inequity and food deserts. It's also illegal to grow public food for public use in New York. You can't do it. It's illegal to forage. You can go to jail for foraging, and you can also get in trouble for allowing people to forage. But the water has different laws. So we decided to build on the water. This was our plan. Got a giant 5,000 square foot metal barge, put on 100 tons of trees and houses and rocks, water bladders cut open so that we could make makeshift planters that were big enough to just prototype this design and show that people would want it. And it was a fantastic success. People loved it. We had water filtration that worked pretty well from our really dirty river. We had solar power, and we had hundreds of species of plants and edible plants, medicinal plants. We had, at that time, we had no trees. There's trees in this photo, but that time we had no trees. It looked more like this, so plants like that. And so in 2016, we proved that people wanted it. We proved that people wanted a place where they could come and teach their kids what growing vegetables was like, a place where they could come and pick vegetables and pick native plants and learn about indigenous and local food to the Northeast. And so we did what any great organization would do. We improved our logo, right? So 2017, way better logo. But we also improved the design of the barge. We put on hills and trees and an orchard. Here we are in Concrete Plant Park. Concrete Plant Park is in the Bronx. It's at this spot where over 3/4 of the food in the Northeast comes right through there. It's the packing district. Your parents go work at the packing district during the day, and they come back at night with none of that food. In this neighborhood, there are more waste transfer stations than there are grocery stores. Other people's waste comes through there, and that waste gets sorted, and there's more of those than there are places where you could buy a vegetable. In fact, you're lucky to find a bruised banana at a liquor store. And so this community was really behind this. Youth Ministries of Peace and Justice is one of the organizations here in the Bronx at Concrete Plant Park, and they just fought to keep this thing. We had 200,000 visitors over a few years. It's still going now. We have 500 million media impressions, which is important because we're trying to inspire people about food. Right? We had, here's a personal story of one of the successes. It's just one anecdote, but I get to the barge. I've been on there for 5 minutes. I had just come back after I was the project manager on this project. I had just come back after that. And a little boy comes running up to his mom, and he's like, Mommy, Mommy, that grew from this. Right? And she looked at us, and she was like, man, there's just not enough nature up here in the Bronx. And she looked kind of embarrassed, right? And I was like, we should just be embarrassed as a society, right? As a society that we don't build enough nature and enough food for just all kids to know that. So that was one example of success. But another example that I love, and an incredibly punk rock example, is that the New York Park Department just said, you know what? We're just going to break the law, right? You can't take the park department to jail for breaking this law. So they just built a foodway. And here it is, built. It's been in the ground since the end of last year. And we'll just see what happens. And that's what they said. They're like, we're going to build it? Yeah, all right. All right, we'll just do it. And so, of course, our hope is that this ludicrous law changes, right? And that people can plant public food for public use, and the communities can have food for their community members, just growing. These floating barges are much more Waterworld, and this is not Waterworld, right? This is Tank Girl that we're here for. So I want to talk a little bit about this movie. There's some science things in this movie that might not quite make sense, This device right here, you stick into someone's body, it extracts their water, right? Because water is that valuable. But it's like filling up like a liter of water, and let's just do some quick math. A person weighs, I don't know, let's say a person weighs 80 kilograms. All right, so you got an 80 kilogram person. An old person only is 55% water, right? You're younger, you have more water in you, so maybe, but don't kill children just for their water. But like the older people, maybe, I don't know. We're in tank girl world now. So 80 kilogram person, 55% water, so at least 40 kilograms of water is in that person, a little bit more, but 40 kilograms. And if we were in any other country, it would be really easy to remember that a kilogram of water is a liter, right? So there would be 40 liters. So that thing, you should have like 40 of those stuck into a person, is what I think. But, whatever. Also, it doesn't have to explain where the cigarettes come from, or in this case, the clove, because, that's definitely more punk rock. Why smoke something that will, make your lungs hurt when you can smoke something that will make your lungs bleed, right? But they're just in the movie, and people just waste them. I'm like, this is supposed to be 11 or 13 years after a comet has hit the Earth, right? I feel like by then cigarettes are getting a little bit low. But no, you got candy necklaces and cigarettes abound. Also, this movie has tank girl, jet girl, sub girl. What do these things usually need to drive? They need gas, right? Gas goes bad in a few months, even if you put in stabilizers, and maybe they're running diesel, and so maybe you get a year, but then gas goes bad. And also, since we're talking about the apocalypse, I'd love to point out that you have these 3 containers. All of these containers are for fuels. None of them are for water. This movie is about water and power. You don't use any of those for water. But, not only does the movie not need to explain any of that, it doesn't need to explain why our heroine is barbecuing while driving her tank while in a fight scene. And I love that. I like to think it's because she wanted to, right? This movie has the antagonist, fantastic actor, representing water and power. But I'm going to focus my talk on water and really look at this logo, right? W and P. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason it's water and power, not just because it sounds good, not just because water is power, but also because of this rule of 3s. Right? Without food, you can easily go 3 weeks. Without water, 3 days. Without air, 3 minutes. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. Without a nice environment, whoa, sorry. Without water, 3 days. Without a great environment, 3 hours. And without air, 3 minutes. It's just general rules. Feel free to try to go longer. But water, it's hard to remember. If you've lived in a rich country and in a rich place in that country, it's hard to remember how quickly you need water. We just have it all the time in rich places. And maybe you've gone camping and ran out of water and then or maybe you've lived in a poor environment or a financially poor neighborhood or a financially poor country and recognize that when the water goes, after a day there's a problem. Right? After a day of no food, it kind of becomes easy to stop eating. Like after a day, a lot of times you don't even notice for a few more days. But water, you stop being able to think clearly. Right? And so then you start drinking dirty water. And that water makes you sick. And that water is still one of the largest killers in the world. This is our planet, about 7,918 miles in diameter. The total water is a diameter of 859 miles. If you made a sphere of all of the water that's available, 859 miles in diameter. That's relative size. There it is, the diameter of water. What's the problem with that water? It's salty. Right? It's pretty hard to get water, drinkable water, out of that salty water. It's kind of a cruel joke, right? Like, here's plenty of water. It's salty. The fresh water is 2.5% of that. That's the diameter of the fresh water on the planet available for us, if you were to make it all into one sphere. That's 251 miles of diameter, is that sphere of fresh water. What's the problem with that water? It's dirty and it's frozen, or at least it's frozen for now. So the water that's easily available, 1%. That's our dot, that's our diameter. To give you context, there we are, a sphere of all of the easily available drinkable water in the entire world fits between Trinidad and Myers Flat, which is clearly where it's at. Just right, that's it. Isn't that crazy? Like, thank goodness for these natural processes that keep going. And so that's why I'm going to focus on rainwater, because this natural process is just happening for us. On an average U.S. house, not this one, that one in the back, you can catch 33,000 gallons per year. A lot more in Humboldt because it's raining here all the time. But just on average, 33,000 gallons per year can be caught on that roof. That's water that if you didn't catch would just run off of the impermeable surfaces, usually collect dirt and cause erosion on its way into a sewer system and then dumped out into a waterway. I want to tell you some stories of rainwater catchment. This is La Yuca de Naco in Santo Domingo is the only poor community left in the center of Santo Domingo. All the rest have been pushed to the edge of the city. But La Yuca has fought. They've kept themselves there. So you're in this community, walls you can touch both sides. You're walking down the street, you can touch both sides of the wall. If you're carrying equipment and there's a moped coming by you, you like get to know each other really, really well. This community, you can stand on the roofs and you can look out at people that are making $10, $20 a day, but you're inside of this community that's making a couple dollars a day. In this community, there's a school. It's the only spot that has a little bit of area for kids to play. And this school has to buy 2 trucks of water every month just for the cleaning and the toilet flushing. But the toilet flushing is only at night, and there's no hand washing for the kids. So we work together with the community to design and iterate over years this system that now makes it so the school only has to buy 2 trucks of water a year instead of 2 trucks a month. And there's hand washing for the students. And when the students hand wash, that water then goes into the toilet, and they can use that to flush every few hand washings. And there's water to drink, and there's water for the director of the school to shower with, and there's water to clean with. And this is all just from rainwater on their small community. And that project was made by engaged community members who are only making a couple of dollars a day, but still finding time to find resources and come and meet and apply their knowledge and their abilities in order to make this thing better for their own community. I'm going to tell you another story, this one from a village in Chiapas, Mexico. I worked with a group called Otros Mundos. And just in this vein of badass female heroine leaders, Otros Mundos is a women-run organization, and they were phenomenal in making projects happen. They still are to this day. We work directly with them on a bunch of different projects. Here's one. This is a community, a Tzotzil community. I can't say exactly where because they're in war with the Mexican government. The Mexican government has cut off power to this community because the Mexican government wants the resources that are under the ground. But they're fighting to stay there. There's also a long dry season, and during that dry season, eventually people have to drink surface water. And so this community came together with Otros Mundos, bringing us in for us all to figure out a system that would work. And they came up with this brilliant plan where they were going to catch water off of multiple roofs, collect it into one joint ferro cement tank, which is just a kind of handmade metal and concrete tank. And then that water would be saved and used during the dry period by everybody in the community. It's a small community, but by everybody in the community. In this house right here, every time I showed up, they fed me. Right? A community that has under $1 a day. Yet I'd show up and there'd be eggs with nopalitos or green beans that were grown here, and lemongrass tea, and just amazing food run by the food was served and made by the matriarch of this family. She had her kids and grandkids living with her. Together, this system provides a yearly potential of 129,000 liters, right, into this 19,000 liter tank, and it serves the entire community. I want to keep telling you more stories. This one's Eureka, California, right where we're at. 2007, this school, Zane Middle School, which is the largest middle school between San Francisco and Eugene, Oregon, built a rainwater catchment system with students from Humboldt State University for their garden. And this rainwater catchment system has all types of standard rainwater catchment things, but it also has some really unique designs, including a zip tie that if students try to jump up onto the system, it looks like the whole system breaks, but it's really just a zip tie. In the last few years, they've only spent 15 cents fixing this system, but I'm pretty sure every student who thought they broke it just ran and hid forever and like, oh my God, I broke the system. Also, this is enough water that in case of an emergency, in case of a natural disaster, which do happen here, there's enough water to provide some clean drinking water for their students to last a few more days. Same thing with this community group. They built a rainwater catchment system just for their garden and their chickens, but it's a giant system. But they built it that big because they wanted water for their entire block in case of natural disaster. Really excited to work with them under that context. Unfortunately, their tank was too close to the road for the new setback laws. But we brought together community members, and for a year and a half, we fought the city of Eureka, worked with, gently discussed rainwater catchment systems. And there was a bunch of great flowery language in the Eureka Code, things like designs that work with nature and save water will be supported. And we're like, that's exactly what we're doing. This is the right spot for the tank because it flows with gravity from the roof to the tank and then naturally into the backyard because the front yard was higher. And eventually we won. We got a variance, which now means that anyone in Eureka can put their tank where it belongs. Yeah, go Eureka.